Well, welcome. Francis Tamer Show, episode 4.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Mate, the pleasure's mine. Of all the people I know, you're probably one of the people I've known the longest. And so we're going back quite a bit on the journey of the Dugster, a.k.a. Duguid, a.k.a. the physio. We're running on a budget here still. Tell us, Dug, so what's your background so our listeners can get a bit of a overview?
So I'm a physiotherapist by trade. From high school straight into
Bring that a bit closer. Yep.
Straight into uni.
You can rotate it and just like that.
So straight out of high school into uni doing physio, and then been working for the last 6.5 years at a private practice just in Jordan Springs. So that's my professional background. And then I guess life in general. Grew up playing a lot of sport, namely rugby league, touch football, and cricket. Dabble in a bit of golf these days, but sport's always been a big part of my life. And along with that comes injuries, and that meant going to the physio when I was younger in my teenage years, and that's what sort of got me interested in the rehabilitation space, and consequently into the gym. And so that's been a big personal hobby, and I've done a lot of of my own research in learning about that, and really enjoyed that side of things. And
how long you've been working as a physio now?
6.5 years.
Yeah, what's sort of the most common injury you see come in?
I'd say lower back pain would be the most common, and it's quite broadly categorized because it's very hard to be specific with a structural diagnosis with lower back pain. But lower back pain in general would be the most common. And
lower back pain due to injury, or just lower back pain from both injury and
both? For a atraumatic onset, someone hasn't picked up something heavy or twisted or fallen, it's just sort of gradually come on.
And is that just because of our lifestyles now? A lot of sitting down, a lot of inactivity.
Yeah, it tends to be more stiffness related, and just like I said, lifestyle related. So people, aren't taking good enough care of their body. And the analogy I like to use, and been using it more recently, is thinking of our body more like a garden and nurturing that garden. It needs sunlight, it needs water, a bit of fertilizer, take out all the weeds. So, how that relates to us is, are we exercising? Are we eating right? Are we sleeping well? Are we managing, the stresses of life? Because, what we're learning now about the body and pain is it's not so mechanical. We work in what we call a biopsychosocial framework. So it's taking into account the whole person. And
repeat that for me.
Biopsychosocial.
Biopsychosocial.
Yeah. So we're taking into account the whole person and their environment and how that influences their body. And it's a very complex web of interactions that lead to someone experiencing pain. It's not so straightforward, which is a challenge of the job, but a challenge I enjoy.
Yeah. So I think traditionally the view on health has been sort of, eat healthy, train, but I think we have left out the environment aspect a lot in how it influences that. Yeah. I mean, just who you surround yourself with obviously has a profound impact on sort of how you live your life and the way you do things. And so I think if you're trying to address it without addressing the environment, it could be quite the challenge, I reckon.
Yeah.
Even for myself, growing up, I found that when I was in sort of just a broader social situation where certain aspects of health weren't valued, it does impact me quite profoundly. And I think it'd probably be the same for most people. I'm guessing a lot of your mates are big on sports and big on training, and it's a sort of a central part of your friendship almost.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you were saying back pain. What about lower body injuries?
They're quite common, particularly in a more sporting population or in the
ankles?
Gym. Yeah, ankles, knees.
Yeah, I've got some beef with my ankles. Yeah.
Yeah, like many people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think off the top of my head, they're like maybe number 4 on the list of like most common
Ankle
injuries.
sprains.
Yeah.
Number 4. Do you know 1, 2, 3?
I think like next number 2, and then maybe like shoulder pain is number 3.
Yeah, right. And with shoulders as well, do you think that's also correlated with lifestyle?
Yeah.
At least for myself, I find I'm in the software space, so always sitting down, and so I've always sort of felt I've had issues with hips, shoulders. It's sort of a recurring cycle.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of carryover amongst like most body parts with like injuries and the factors that predispose someone to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, what we're spending a majority of the time on is going to weigh in where the stress and load is being put on our body.
And you recently did a strength and conditioning certification, is that right?
Yeah. Well, wasn't so recent. It's probably about 3 years ago now.
Right.
I'm guessing it's sort of, I think it was sort of as we were sort of coming out of lockdown. So, yeah, 3-4 years. So,
and what sort of prompted that? Are you hoping to move into a different space or just for your own learning?
it was, more my own learning, and then just, I guess putting a qualification on, some experiences and knowledge that I already had. And obviously, you're always going to learn things from, doing courses like that. So, it's like having that professional recognition of my, I guess, expertise in that area.
Well, one of the reasons I brought you on, and I told you I was going to bring you on, is I was going to be a bit of a guinea pig. And we were going to talk about some of my results from a recent scan. So I did a DEXA scan 4 years ago for our listeners, and I did one last November, and I did one last Thursday. We're Saturday now. And I sent you the results pretty much of everyone, and I thought it'd be a good topic of conversation to have a look at what's happened, the good, the bad, what needs to happen, and maybe sort of set like a 90-day sort of challenge, maybe get you back in 90 days. We'll see how things went. You know what? I'll bring up the results. Do you want to?
Yeah, I think so.
Help if you look. Let me just grab the iPad. This little part here.
Are you able to put like a would you do like not an infographic, but like a graphic on screen of?
Yeah. I'll put a graphic on screen, sort of like with a summary of the results that we want to show at least. And we can't give the people too much about Francis Tamer 4 episodes in. So just for some context, 4 years ago I did a DEXA scan. Do you want to just explain what a DEXA scan is? You're probably better at explaining than I am.
Basically, I wouldn't say I am an expert in DEXA scans. I've never had one. I've had something similar personally.
Yeah.
But I'm by no means any expert on it. But basically, it gives you a more accurate depiction of your fat mass and muscle mass, and you can work out body fat percentages, and it organizes it based on your like limbs and torso, so that you can see where you store fat, or where maybe some weaknesses in your muscle mass, if that's something that you're concerned about, laying, and gives you some ideas of what you might need to work on.
So for those listening, a DEXA scan is actually, it was originally for measuring bone density. But that same technology can also be used to distinguish between bone, muscle, and fat. And so it's become pretty big in sort of in the fitness space, for at least for tracking fat loss and muscle gain. And it's one of the most accurate ways as well to actually test for that, probably second to potentially the hydrostatic. Have you heard of hydrostatic fat testing, where you get submerged? It's a bit extra, but apparently it works well.
Yeah.
And the most accurate would be MRIs, but they don't typically use those for body comps much because they're not cheap. So I've got the results up. You've already reviewed these, and I think, like I said, I thought it would make a good sort of topic of conversation as to probably what went well. I can give some context. I did a scan last November, after November, my training was pretty irregular. And then I went on holidays in January. And when I got back from holidays, I still had an injury from late December, which you were aware of course, as my trusted advisor. And I didn't really start training again till the beginning of March. And so from March till now, we're talking 3 months. I've trained pretty consistently, at least I think. I think I've put in the hours, put in the effort. And so the DEXA scan was sort of to see what could have happened in that 3 months. Now, what I did notice is I did put on a lot of weight. And as we all know, weight isn't enough to indicate good or bad. Depends what you put on. I suspected a fair bit of it was probably water weight due to the creatine intake, which varied from between 5 and 10 grams a day, closer to 5, probably around 7. I'd always add a little bit more. So I've sort of read, and I don't know what your view is, that it's okay if you go a bit over, especially if you're a bit bigger, and like worst case, you just sort of piss it out or something, right? So
That's
it's
right.
no big deal.
Yeah.
All right, I've got the results here, and I will hand that to you. And yeah, I mean, when I sent it to you, you just kept saying this is interesting, and we avoided talking about it so we could sort of go through it here. So maybe we can sort of get your thoughts live.
So how do you want to do this? You want to go through segmentally at a time?
Look, let's just start with like key observations. You know, some things that may have stood out, maybe overall, whether you think it's a positive or negative, and yeah, then we can break down sort of the things that stood out. And if you have any questions as to how we arrived here, we can go through it.
So I guess an interesting thing that stood out was that pesky left leg of yours.
Yeah.
Where we did see a negative change, which was, I guess, in contrast to everything else that...
yeah, look, I wasn't happy about that left leg. I wasn't happy. I thought I'd been pretty consistent with the lower body training. I thought I had the intensity. Maybe I was deceived by the DOMs, but yeah, it's a bit surprising. But I think what's interesting there is between the one 4 years ago and the one last November, there was a huge sort of difference that built between the left and the right leg. So if you look at the one November last year, there's quite a bit of a difference between my left and right leg. And I remember speaking to you about it at the time, and we sort of suspected it could have been after my 2 ankle sprains, my body could have started compensating a lot more on my left, which could have led to more muscle growth. What's the difference? Like 1.3 kilos or something, or 1.2 kilos in difference?
Yeah, 1.3.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now it's 1.2. Is that right?
Now it's 1.2 difference?
Would that be right?
No, it should be... I'm pretty sure the right leg has more now.
Nah, the right's still down. Oh, yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm looking at the fat.
Yeah.
My bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I've made up the muscle difference in the right leg, and it's even more than the left now. But it completely baffled me that the left was down. I'm starting to doubt the accuracy of the DEXA scan after I just said it's that accurate.
Yeah.
It's got me a bit confused, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day as well, like a bit of a difference between side to side isn't the end of the world. So what I generally go by in like rehabilitating someone from an injury is more so we're looking at strength.
Than muscle mass.
Yeah. But like muscle mass
typically correlates.
Yeah. And there is, comes into the equation. We're looking at like side to side, like 10% discrepancy we consider to be normal. Like we're not exactly symmetrical as humans. And yeah, you'd be doing very well to be spot on with everything. So I think unless you're like a professional bodybuilder
where you need that perfect muscular symmetry.
Yeah. It's not going to make too much of a difference, and nor is anyone going to notice something like that, even prior to when you did have a bit more of that difference between your left and right.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Well, there was a noticeable difference in strength as well when I had that difference.
Yeah.
Which I did notice while I was training.
Which is, again, maybe then something more to,
But now that difference is sort of gone. I feel like they're sort of equal. So I'm sort of hoping from this point that my left actually gains a bit of muscle rather than...
Were you doing much like
unilateral?
Yeah.
Probably less than 20% of the time.
Yeah.
So most times, like, obviously the sort of primary lift was the high bar barbell squat. And I would also leg press. I would also pendulum squat. And there were a few sessions where I would finish with, say, like Bulgarian split squats and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But as I looked back after getting these results, maybe it wasn't as consistent
Mm-hmm.
enough. And so maybe it was the case when I am squatting or when I am leg pressing that maybe my right sort of was doing a lot of the work. And it could have been almost subconscious that I know my right is lacking, so I'm trying to push a little bit more.
There wasn't any conscious sort of effort to do that though?
Not too deliberate, no.
Okay.
Because I had found when I first started training, I'd lean to my left a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe I was sort of leaning to my right, maybe a little bit too much. So
maybe.
Could be the issue.
Yeah. Be interesting to, if you had like some like technique videos to break it down.
I have some videos, but I'm not sure it's the angle that would give you the proper sort of look at technique. Yeah.
But yeah, either way, mate, it's a positive change nonetheless. So you know, things are heading in the right direction. And see things have remained relatively stable with the head. So and see
so for those listening, the DEXA the DEXA scan segments like left hand, left arm, left leg, right leg, your torso, trunk, also known as the trunk, and then the head. So yeah, the head was like pretty stable, not much muscle gain in the head.
Yeah, but a decent difference. Like your muscle mass went up 2 kilos, correct, from November?
No, the total I think is, you got to look at the bottom total.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So up 3 kilos?
Up 3.2.
Yeah.
Now there is a bit of a that is technically an estimation because my DEXA last November, my left arm was cut out, and so they simply copied my right arm.
Okay.
So what I did is I've adjusted the left and simply taken a value exactly between the one 4 years ago and the one on Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I can do that is because it's such a small difference in 4 years. Like, it's very likely it's between those two values, if you can see there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty safe estimate.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a total of 3.2 kilos.
Mm-hmm. You know what's confusing me? How many digits there are. I'd like the decimal point moved over a few.
What do you mean?
Well, we're saying like 3,218
That's
grams. I know.
Yeah.
It'd be easy if it was in kilograms.
Yeah, it would be. I just copied it straight off the report. That's all.
Yeah.
I've copied it straight off. So
yeah. But yeah, like I said, a positive, you know, shift in terms of your muscle mass and probably like body composition. Obviously your fats increased a little bit, 1.3 kilos. Yeah.
Honestly, I thought it was going to be more. So I'll take that as a W.
Which,
so 3.2 kilos in 3 months. I'm guessing that's not going to be sustainable. Like, eventually that's going to slow down, right?
Yeah. So for like I guess like a novice lifter or someone that's like has like, I guess, deconditioned a bit, which would probably be your case, and you're sort of reconditioning because you've had, you know, sporadic periods of resistance training.
Yeah.
I think like a rough guide is like 0.5 kilo to 1 kilo a month. Like if you're able to put on that, that's like 12 kilos a year, 6 to 12 kilos a year. It's pretty solid. And if you're able to, you know, do that for a year or two in your initial phases, you can, you know, make some fairly significant changes to your body comp. So, yeah, I guess what I was going to point out is, I guess, like having that increase in your body fat of 1.3 kilos, just, I guess, highlights that we are in a calorie surplus, which is definitely something that, we want in order to put on muscle. But
we want to do it as lean as possible. Yeah.
Ideally, for I think for most people, that's the goal.
Yeah. Look, honestly, it's been a struggle. The last month, I've just been eating like an absolute animal, and I was concerned going into this DEXA for that reason.
Yeah.
Because like I'm pushing like 130 kilos, you know, in total. I'm like 126 or something ridiculous. So I was pretty concerned. But I guess like the 1.3, while it's not great, it could be. Oh, that's not good. Shouldn't be coming through. While it's not great, it could be a lot worse. So I guess the next step now is like, how do we sort of do that a little bit more? How do we do it a lot leaner, essentially?
Yeah.
which we can get to. But can you just run through, you've got it on the screen, for each body part, what the net change was? Because there was one of them, I'm trying to remember which one that really pissed me off as well.
So we go with left arm. So you more concerned with the muscle change?
Yeah.
Wasn't much difference. What's that like?
Yeah, that's the one that pissed me off. That left arm.
Yeah.
Look at it 4 years ago compared to now.
What's that, 50 grams?
It's like nothing.
Yeah.
And that one also baffled me. Like I've been half of my, you know what? I mean, half of my bicep training is unilateral, but I think my tricep training has been two-handed primarily.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And my right has put on pretty, like, relative to the left quite decently.
So, like, in November 2019, 4.5 kilos on your right arm, and now it's 5.6.
Yeah.
So, it's a solid 1.1 kilo increase in lean muscle mass on that right arm, solid. And that nearly half a kilo since last November.
Yeah.
But realistic, obviously, it's been 3 months of training. So, that's solid.
Solid for one arm, but
but the other arm is
doing nothing.
So maybe it is that tricep. But it is interesting, like intuitively you'd think, oh yeah, I'm right-handed, so I'm likely, being more dominant on that. But I've found sometimes that's not always the case. Like I said, I had some form of scan as well, and I'm right-handed too, but my left arm actually was slightly bigger than my right, and same with my legs as well. So and I found it with patients as well, with testing their strength with, various muscle groups that not always
It's not always your dominant side. Interesting.
Yeah. Like we have called a handheld dynamometer, which can measure your grip strength. And I consistently test better on my left than I do my right. So I can't explain why.
Yeah. Does our brain just develop like a dominance in different sort of behaviors rather than everything's right or everything's left?
I think so, yeah. I'm not too sure.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to brush your teeth, with your left hand?
It feels so gummy.
That left arm, that was a bit of a problem. So now I think I just have to make all my arm movements for a while unilateral. Would you agree?
I think still have the best of both worlds. Obviously, you just want to shift that bias to doing some more unilateral stuff, like with your tricep work. But bilateral training is still good because I think it allows you to progressively overload.
But isn't the risk with that, if you're progressively overloading with bilateral training, but one arm is just getting more and more dominant, the more you progress, the more dominant it gets because the other one's sort of lagging?
Yes and no. Like, I feel like you're balancing that out with the more unilateral volume, and you might also consider even doing like a couple more sets of some like single arm cable extensions as an example, just on that left to give it that extra little bit of volume to counteract that. But excuse me, I guess you still want to, be making progress on the right too, so you don't, want that to stagnate. Yeah. So I'd encourage a bit of both, I think.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah. Get the best of both worlds.
Don't sack it completely yet then.
Yeah. So yeah, we spoke about the right arm, trunk. Okay, solid 2 kilo increase in musculature there. So I guess that would account for your pecs, lats,
back,
rhomboids, traps, potentially some of like the abdominal and lower back muscles. So obviously you're gonna fair few muscle groups there. So you'd want to see a good change there, and that is solid. So
up until recently, I thought the trunk on there referred to your glutes.
Oh, really?
It just made more sense to me that that's what it was referring to. I'm like, man, how do I have so much fat and muscle just in my glutes? It just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
They should include some definitions in that report, I reckon.
Yeah. It would be helpful because, there may be some, I'm not too sure exactly, but, someone doing a DEXA scan versus someone else might interpret things differently and, different definitions. I mean, the good thing is like you didn't put on heaps of fat in through that trunk region, which
good point.
Genetically, as males, that is the predisposition, like
The
usually
visceral fat.
That's right. Fat tends to be stored around that abdominal area. So,
which is a pretty big indicator for our risk of like disease and heart conditions and whatnot, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Like systemic inflammation as well is like, I think mediated the right word by that visceral fat.
Yeah.
So, that's solid. I spoke a bit about that left leg. They've lost both muscle and fat. I mean, in the scheme of things, it's not heaps, 150 grams. But yeah, I guess same thing, a little bit more of that unilateral work on that to try to balance it out a little bit more. And the right leg overall, you got a bit leaner and put on some muscle. And I guess that's the beauty of being a novice with that resistance training or reconditioning in your case. You can lose fat and put muscle on the same time. So for body composition goals, that's very helpful. And yeah, that's all of the areas covered.
Yeah, cool. All right. So in terms of like a goal, let's say the next 90 days, but nothing other than entertainment at this stage. I mean, it's probably, I don't know if it's entertaining for anyone to watch, but for me, it's ideally for the betterment of my health. At what point do you consider someone out of the novice or beginner stage?
I think a year.
Yeah.
Like consistent training.
So
Like
it's time-based, not like relative strength-based or anything?
In terms of body composition, I would go by time. Yeah.
Okay. And so is it a realistic goal over the next 90 days to focus both on muscle gain and fat loss simultaneously?
I think so, yeah. I think if your calorie surplus is a little bit more skinnier, that would be achievable. I wouldn't say it's like a guarantee, but there's a decent chance that happen. I mean, I'm not a dietitian or have a specific, qualification in that field. It's just more my personal research
your experience,
and experience. But yeah, give it a crack.
Yeah.
Yeah. The goal at the end of the day, if you don't achieve it, no harm done.
Just give up. Yeah. If it doesn't work, we'll just give up and
no, we learn from it and we do better next time.
Yeah, and then we just pay Dugs more money for better advice, for the secret sauce.
Yeah.
So how do we go about this? We spoke a little bit about it, and I thought it would also be a good topic of discussion. Like, honestly, I've never been big on the whole counting calories thing. I've accepted I need to do it and give it a go. Where do we start?
Well, I guess like if you're just starting off and haven't really delved into it too much, it'd be sort of trying to work out what your maintenance, I guess, calorie intake is, which is how much, in a nutshell, how much do you need to eat based on your current activity levels to maintain your current body weight?
Yeah. All right, how do we work that out?
So there's like some calculations you can do online, and that might give you a good like ballpark.
Can we do it now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It might give us a good ballpark figure. And then from there, you just need to see what's happened. So say the calculator spits out 3,000 calories a day.
Is there a specific one you recommend, or just sort of they're all pretty similar?
They're all.
Yeah. Try that one.
Like, what I was about to say is like it's a trial and error process anyway. So, say it spits out a 3,000 calorie per day intake and you stick to that fairly consistently. You don't have to be exactly spot on, you're 2,900 one day, 3,100, as long as it like balances out over the week. I wouldn't be super, anal about being perfect.
So on the activity selector, when it's saying, intense exercise, what counts as intense?
From what I'm aware of definitions from the World Health Organization, they sort of split into like vigorous and moderate based aerobic activity.
So like going for a jog is obviously moderate.
Yeah. So if you're able to still like maintain a conversation, and they say like you're able to talk but not sing, then that would be considered moderate. And if
like zone 2.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So and then like a vigorous would be obviously you're pushing it a bit harder. And
Is that strength training?
so I'd consider strength training vigorous.
Okay.
And in terms of like calorie burning, it does a decent job of that.
There's a BMR estimation formula. Which one is the recommended, or it just doesn't really matter?
I'm not 100% familiar with those, so I'm not too sure, to be honest. I believe stands for basal metabolic rate. Basically, your metabolism.
It's saying maintenance calories 3,600.
Okay. Solid. Got some room to play with then.
Is that a lot of food? I feel like that's a lot of food.
Oh, it's decent, but I mean, there's a bit of muscle there to support turbo. So
yeah, turbo. Man, I haven't been called turbo in a very long time, man.
11 years.
That's a long time. Look, I tried one of the other formulas where you can actually input your fat percentage, and it gave 3,500.
Okay.
So we're talking 35 to 3,600.
Like I said, it's a ballpark figure.
Ballpark, okay.
And then,
So what, do you usually just start with like, say, so does it have to be a surplus? Is it possible to gain muscle in a deficit?
Very good question. I think in that novice stage, it would, if you're having adequate protein.
Okay. Adequate being how much?
So the recommendations are for 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now, if you are slightly bigger, you may not need to have as much protein. This is just generally, but if you were wanting to try to put on muscle whilst in a calorie deficit, then I think having slightly more or being on that higher end of that spectrum, 2.2, maybe creeping into 2.4 grams per kilo.
Why is it based on body weight and not lean body weight, like muscle mass?
A good question.
I feel like it makes more sense to go off how much muscle you have, not how much weight you have.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Like I said, I'm not a dietitian. What I am aware, if someone is, I guess, in that obese category, they base it more so off your body height. And they recommend to eat the amount of grams, say like your 170 centimeters, have 170 grams of protein. Like off the top of my head, I think that, but that gives you that rough ballpark figure.
I feel like all the rules that I've heard around protein intake, they all leave you in the similar range.
That's right. Yeah.
Like me at my height and weight, I'm going to be consuming between 170 and 250 sort of grams.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm sort of hitting that. All right. So if my maintenance is apparently 3,500, and do I just is the goal, because it's obviously an estimation? There are more accurate ways to test that, right? Where they put some thing on they measure your breathing or something like that, right?
I'd say so, but I can't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah. All right, so what, do we try say 3,300 for a week and see what happens? Is that what you do? And then you adjust?
That's right, yeah. And I guess obviously if your goal is weight loss, and that's, I guess, the tricky thing just with if you're going just off pure body mass, you won't necessarily know how much you're losing fat or muscle. Or
until you do another scan or something.
Yeah, and your body composition may change, you might be putting on muscle and losing fat, so you may be saying relatively the same body weight. Excuse me. But you may take into other things into consideration, how well your clothes are fitting you and whether you need to, tighten up your belt an extra notch. Things like that might give you some indication that you are losing some fat. Or if, your shirt's getting a bit tighter, you might, put on a little bit of bicep and tricep size there.
Yeah, not on my left, of course, maybe on the right, yeah. So would your strength be an indication that you're maintaining muscle, or because changes in muscle would be so minute, it might not affect your strength till it's more significant? If I lose 10 grams of muscle on every body part, my strength would probably remain the same, right?
That's right. Yeah. And strength can be driven by neurological changes as well, not necessarily just muscles. So yeah, I wouldn't think that would be a...
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, basically, if you, aim for that maintenance, or if you want to sort of try to go straight into a deficit. Pick that number. So if you think a deficit, maybe 3,200, stick to that for a week. Measure yourself consistently, like each morning and under the same conditions. So whether you've sort of gone to the toilet, haven't had anything to eat, whether you're in your pajamas or just undies, whatever it is that you're doing to measure
just
yourself.
Make it consistent.
That's right. And then track that daily, because you're going to have natural fluctuations anyway, but the general trend will give you an indication of how your body's responded to that amount of calories. The interesting thing as well, just why I thought of it too, is have you heard of NEAT?
NEAT?
Yeah.
Is it an acronym?
Yeah.
So I haven't.
Stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So it's little movements that your body does throughout the day subconsciously that burns calories.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
I haven't heard of the term, but I saw a clip of Andrew Huberman the other day where he's saying like people that are always bouncing and moving can burn up to like an extra 1,000 calories a day because they're so jittery.
Yeah, but what also is really interesting, when you are in a calorie deficit, your body will naturally lessen how much it's doing those fidgety movements to try to
conserve.
Yeah, and maintain that sort of homeostasis.
Interesting, yeah.
So that's something to consider as well. Obviously, there isn't heaps you can do about like that. It's like a subconscious thing, but you could potentially do more, conscious movements to rectify that if you're noticing things starting to plateau, after a while of being in a deficit.
And it's my understanding that that's why having a huge deficit is a bad idea because your body will fight back.
Yeah, that's right.
And you might have great results for the first week or two, then your body adjusts and it's like, oh, I have to go even lower now because there's nothing else I can do to. So is that sort of a common understanding?
Yeah.
Because I've seen a few videos recently. I don't know if you've heard of that YouTube channel, More Plates, More Dates. That Derek dude, some jacked guy with they call him, they say he has Death Star delts. That's how 3D his delts are.
Yeah.
Anyway, he does a lot of review videos on natty or not and steroid use and muscle building and whatnot. And one of the points he made was, if you're just gradually losing, as soon as you feel you're plateauing, you can just gradually decrease that little bit more. And it doesn't have such a profound impact on your mental state.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just drop 1,000 calories, you're going to be always hungry and probably frustrated. And you get even more frustrated when your body starts to plateau the loss and whatnot.
Yeah. And then you just get into that stuff at stage. And
yeah, I've been in that stuff at stage for maybe 10 years now. No, I'm joking.
And then just, yo back up. And that's something that I encourage the people that I encounter. And it's more regards to just promoting healthy habits anyways.
Something sustainable.
That's right. Just thinking about that. What's that long-term solution? Not just, doing it for a certain period of time to, look good for a wedding or whatever. Do something sustainable to maintain that health. And it's going to be a lot more achievable that way.
Yeah. It reminds me of times that I've done longer fasts. We're talking days. And after a few days, you actually slow down significantly how much weight you're losing. And that's because your body is very good at adjusting to the shitty conditions you put it in.
That's right.
You know? So it's not like, I just won't eat for 2 weeks and I'll be fine. Because after 3-4 days, it'll plateau a lot and really slow down.
Yeah.
And I've done it. I've fasted up to 5-6 days. And that's exactly what happened. It sort of plateaued.
And I think it is recommended for when you have been in a deficit for a little while to take a diet break for a week or two, just where you then bump up your calories slightly to more of a maintenance dose. Gives you a bit of a break mentally, having a few more calories, wiggle room.
Yeah, you confuse the body a little bit. Make the body think that, things are fine.
Yeah, it sort of just stabilizes things and then you can go again. And there are ways, I think it's called reverse dieting. Have you heard of that?
Reverse dieting?
Yeah.
No,
so it's I think common in people competing in bodybuilding. So after you've just gone to a show and you've, been in a calorie deficit consistently for quite some time, in order to not like throw your metabolism out of whack so much is you slowly build back your calories week to week instead of just going, okay, I've done my show, I can just eat as normal again. I think that's a helpful way for someone that has like lost weight. They may consider doing that. And basically what that does is it shifts up your maintenance calorie level. So say at the moment you're 3,500 at your current like body comp. And then if you were to reverse diet for a period, you could potentially increase that to 3.7, 3.8. I'm not too sure exactly. I'm making up these figures off the top of my head. But that might make things a bit more sustainable once you're at more of your goal weight or body composition.
And I'm guessing if it's gradual in how you do it, you're not going to see huge spikes.
That's right.
Because your body's adjusting every time you make that adjustment.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of refeeding syndrome. You know, have you heard of refeeding syndrome? It's a fasting term where you fasted for, say, 3-4 days, where if you just pig out on food, it's not just you'll gain weight, you can die because of the electrolyte imbalance.
Yeah, right.
So if you've been fasting and haven't been consuming electrolytes, especially, and you just start eating and you just pig out, like you can have very severe reactions.
Yeah, wow.
And the worst case, while quite rare, is actually death. And it's very hard because as soon as you break that fast, your appetite just absolutely skyrockets. And it's very hard to sort of slow down. So they reckon if you fast for 5 days, you should be reintroducing food generally over 3 days. Start with some broth, move into something else.
So like I guess a similar concept just over a more prolonged period.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever done like a long fast? You ever fasted for a long period of time?
No, I don't think I've even fasted for a full
day,
24 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Duguids, mate.
I've tried a period of intermittent fasting back in high school. I think there's lots of ways you can go about achieving.
No, look, fasting, most of the time, it's very rarely for fat loss.
Yeah.
Like no one fasts 5 days for fat loss. Usually it's because of like sort of the autophagy benefits, which is like the your body replenishing its own cells. There's like other health benefits as like sort of a detox of the body. It's also good at resetting your insulin resistance. It's got a lot of benefits, right? Fat loss being one of them, but there's other stuff. And some people do it for religious reasons. Like half the times I've done it have been sort of for religious reasons. So yeah, it's not really, I don't think it's the right mindset to use it for purely fat loss because then you sort of have this mindset of when I'm not fasting, I can just do what I want.
Yeah.
And, you know, when things get a bit out of hand, I'll just stop eating for 5 days or something like that, you know.
And then obviously if you don't enjoy it, like it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah.
That said, like while it's very hard, there is something enjoyable about it in that you're sort of pushing your mental limit a little bit. Like when I was younger, someone said, "Oh, go a whole day without eating." It's like, "Oh, you can't focus without food, and you can't do this without food," and just all these things we've been taught. And that's the other thing we've been lied to about so much. Like we have. Remember the food pyramid?
Yeah.
Does that food pyramid have anything in it that is true? The base of our diet is bread and carbs and just a little bit of meat at the top.
Yeah.
Like we've been lied to about it. Not lied as in they deliberately lie, but it's just, one study comes out and then all of a sudden it's in textbooks. You know, all of a sudden it's being taught by Healthy Harold, you know, in that shady little dark van. The shady little dark van at school, you know?
Yeah.
So, it's good to sort of break the mental limitations that we put on ourselves, in my opinion. I think running has the same effect, by the way. I think anyone that's never run probably has this idea of themselves, I'm not a runner. I can't run. You know, they might jog for 50 meters and they're like, oh, wow, I don't know how people do this for 10 Ks. But it's not until you cross sort of this threshold, you know, and you get terms like the runner's high where you've sort of crossed this threshold. You're like, wow, I could actually not stop if I wanted to, almost, you know?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with fasting. You have the same effect. The first time I fasted for 24 hours, I just thought I was, you know, cut from a different cloth to the rest of this peasant population. 24 hours. And then I did 40 hours, which is 2 nights. And that was, at the time, by far the hardest thing I'd done. And then I did 2 days and eventually I did 3 days. And just now before Easter, I did 5 days. I started Sunday night and I ended pretty much Saturday. And in that week, I trained 3 times. Just a normal training session. Now, the difference is I did sort of cheat in that I consumed electrolytes. And it's good to do so. So have you ever heard of that brand Sodi or Sodi? Sodii. It's like a hydration drink. But it's not like Hydrolyte and all of those. It's just pure electrolytes. So it's got 1,000 milligrams of sodium, I think 200 of potassium and 70 magnesium. The flavored ones have 0.5 grams of carbs. And then there's the unflavored, which doesn't. And so I was drinking that. And
Flavored or unflavored?
the unflavored doesn't have carbs. Oh, what was I drinking?
Yeah.
Look, it may have been flavored. I'll tell you why, though. I'll tell you why. Because all the times I've fasted, I've tried fasting salts that come in like a tub and you put it in your water. It makes me want to gag. I've tried salt tablets. You don't even taste it in your mouth, but just after I swallow it with water, it's like you swallowed salt water. I just couldn't do it. There's been no hydration solution I've found that is 0 carbs or 0 calories and I can actually ingest it. Some people are like, oh, just have like half a teaspoon of salt. I can't do that. It makes me feel sick.
Yeah.
It makes me like nauseous. So when I tried this drink and it worked, I was like, man, if I'm going to have 0.5 grams carbs twice a day, I'm okay with that. And what I'd do is I'd mix the unflavored one also made me feel sick. So I'd mix the unflavored with the flavored. And so like I'm cutting off, 0.5 grams of carbs, But that was a game changer with fasting because in previous times, after 3 days, I start getting cramps, heart palpitations, headaches, just like lightheadedness. So like the lightheadedness is the sodium, the heart palpitations is the potassium, and the muscle cramps. And they were violent, man. Like you'll just be sitting, everything's fine, and just start cramping in all these places. And that's magnesium plays a big role in that deficiency. So this time around, I took the fasting salts, and it was a game changer. You feel $1 million, and you realize that obviously you're not going to live that way, but you realize that over a number of days, if you're consuming electrolytes, you will feel 100% fine and okay.
Would the difference be just that hunger? And I heard that's just maybe like the first 2 days, and then after that, it's pretty much.
For me, after the second night, you're fine. You
feel
don't feel hunger. You don't feel hungry, but you don't feel normal. You feel empty. Right. You feel very light. It's a very strange feeling. So say you start 6 p.m. tonight. Tomorrow is going to be hell. Tomorrow night, you're going to go to a dark place, man. Especially if you've never done it. Even if you've done it. For me, it's always hard. That second night is just, I'm sitting there staring at a wall like, Francis, what are you doing? You don't need to do this.
The table starts looking good to eat.
Yeah, everything starts looking good. Oh, man, everything you smell. And all you have to do the second night is just get to bed. Now, if you've never fasted before, it's going to be very hard to sleep as well. Because when you're fasting, you're starving, your body goes into a state of stress. And you can see a rise in your cortisol. So the first few times I did overnight fasts, like 2 days and whatever, I would sleep at like 2 a.m. and wake up at, like 7 a.m. buzzing. And that's your cortisol, and which is also going to impact your fat loss, by the way. So that's also a reason you shouldn't do huge fasts straight away, is because if it's for fat loss, you're not going to lose fat with a spike in cortisol, the stress hormone. So that's the biggest problem if you're first doing it. But after that second night, you wake up, the hunger's gone, just completely. And every now and then, someone's eating something, you smell it. I'll deliberately smell food. I don't really care. And you just start thinking, oh, man, it'd be good to eat this. And after like 3 or 4 days, you forget what it tasted like. And in your mind, it tastes amazing. You just have this memory like, oh, man, those eggplants, that eggplant salad was the best salad I ever had.
Yeah.
And
interesting.
After you eat the first time, you realize just how wrong you were and that it was all overrated the whole time. And it was, honestly, the first time you eat, like the first bite is like, wow, that was amazing. And then after you have your first meal, you're like, man, it wasn't what I thought it would be. You know what I mean?
All perception, isn't it?
It's all perception. So it's an interesting experience, but you can just imagine someone having the mindset of, oh, this is impossible. Same with jogging, same with weightlifting, same with a lot of things. And it's like, man, our body's pretty good at adjusting. 4 days into the fast, I went with a mate to the gym, and we just did our normal sort of back sesh, which started with deadlifts. And obviously, being a novice, like, or a beginner in terms of consistent training, every week or two, you're PRing. It's just a normal part of being a beginner. And I was fasted 4 days, and we still PR'd as normal, and everything is normal. That said, I drank like 3 liters of water just in that gym session, all with that hydration salt. Like, because you're sweating so much, and you sweat out your electrolytes. Like, the more you sweat, the more electrolytes you need to ingest. So I just couldn't stop drinking. Felt $1 million. Couldn't walk the next day though. So it does take its toll, but it just shows you just how much you can do and how much you've told yourself that you can't do, you know, which is probably the whole experience with most people that you come across in terms of their perception of their own physical abilities, you know, like they might just accept, oh, I'm an old man. I'm always going to have a sore back. You know, I'm getting old. I'm always going to have bad knees. And it's like, well, you don't have to. You know?
That's right. And that's where that sort of biopsychosocial framework comes into it. That's that psychological aspect of it. It's, people putting these own, you know, limiting beliefs on it that, doesn't exist.
Yeah. And how do you deal with that, like with your patients? Because, I mean, it's easy for you to get them to do a few exercises and say, hey, go do this. But how do you deal with the more psychological limitations that they place on themselves?
It's challenging. Everyone's different. And, you know, try to read the person. And I guess that's the art of physio in working that out. I like try to promote like sort of confidence and show them what they're capable of through movement. So whether that is through exercise and trying to, you know, face their fears. So other people, it might be like the opposite approach to like they're pushing themselves way too hard and you need to pull the rein in them. So, it's working out that person in front of you. Sometimes I'll like try to delve a bit deeper into their beliefs and like you get them like second guessing themselves just by sort of how you're asking the question. It's coming from a place of like genuine curiosity and not sort of someone sort of looking down and go, oh no, you're wrong, you know? So I think sort of seeing where they're coming from and then going, well, you know, in my experience, I've seen someone similar and, you know, we did X, Y, Z with them and they had a really good result. You know, it's not a guarantee, but I think it's worth a crack if, you know, as an example, like someone with like osteoarthritis in their knee and they think doing exercise is going to do more damage, they're going to be reluctant to, you know, do some squats. But if you can say, well, if we can, you know, find a way that you can do it that's, you know, comfortable within your pain tolerance and try to build it up and progressively overload, there's a good chance that, you know, your body's going to respond positively and your muscles act like shock absorbers that can help, you know, protect the joint and you know, allow you to do what you need to do without so much stress going through that, you know, injured limb. So, I've gone off topic a little bit, but
no,
I think, appreciate it is quite individualized how like we need to approach those psychological challenges. And it's just, weighing up the person in front of you and seeing how they respond to what you're delivering as well.
Reminds me of the current ATG fever, you know, the whole Ben Patrick knees over toes. Become a big thing, and I'm starting to see more people online who are sort of challenging it, like as if they're overselling what they can actually do. So what's your whole perception on the ATG fever? Yeah,
like I agree. Like he goes, oh, it's strengthening your cartilage and strengthening your ligaments. Which exercise doesn't really do. Like, yes, to an extent, maybe cartilage, you may see some changes, but not necessarily those exercises. For example, like a runner, if we compare someone that doesn't run, a recreational runner, and then like a professional elite runner, it's like a inverted U. So those that don't run and the more professional athletes, are more likely to have osteoarthritis later in life. Whereas that recreational runner has like some positive adaptations to that cartilage where it is a little bit thicker and the joints, I guess, well nourished, and they're less likely to develop it. So some of those claims they make is a bit outlandish, but I do like some aspects of it. Like I think it was maybe 5-10 years ago, there was a little bit of a push in certain circles where like it was dangerous for your knees to go over your toes. So,
it was more than certain circles. It was pretty common. Like every second YouTube video was like, never let your knees go over your toes.
Yeah. But I guess that's what's good. It's like challenge that our bodies are adaptable to things if you find the right, I guess, level for your body, and if you slowly build that up. And I think that's what's good about that ATG program is that it is very like scalable.
Very scalable.
Yeah. You don't need much equipment. So it's a good entry point, but I don't think it's like
it's not the full picture.
Yeah. And like if someone's got more, hypertrophy and strength goals in mind, I don't think that's the best way to achieve that.
So do you think it's good to sort of supplement a good strength or hypertrophy program with some of those exercises? Or even then, you don't even think they're that necessary?
No. Yeah. Unless you're having issues. Yeah, I wouldn't stress too much.
When else would you train your tibs though? No, honest question, but
apparently they're the pansia muscle to train that's going to
bulletproof your knees.
Yeah, and apparently it fixes your lower back as well.
Really?
Well, yeah. According to Andrew Huberman, who I actually do like for the most part, but I feel like recently some of his stuff, he sort of stepped outside his...
I was going to say, I mean, it's great if he can talk about whatever he wants, but I mean, isn't he like a neurologist or
That's right, an ophthalmologist as well? So, yeah. I guess like that's why I don't want to come too hard across as like knowing everything about like the nutrition space, because I don't.
Yeah, you respect what your domain is.
That's right.
That's fair enough.
You only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. So there's that sort of extra layer of when you're, I guess, have professionally studied in a field, than just sort of having that science background, reading a few articles, or having own personal anecdotes and then, delivering that message to everyone. So he was saying those tib ant raisers helped him to walk better, and that helped him fix his back pain. And he's like, oh, if you got back pain, try doing it. Like, it's very hard to give a blanket.
Blanket rule. Yeah. Because there's a million things that can contribute to bad back.
Yeah. So what was your question? Like, how would you train your tib ants?
Yeah, look, I guess my question is, you were saying you don't really need to do that stuff. And a lot of, I'm sure a lot of the movements in that program, and I've seen the ATG program, and a lot of those movements, unless you're right at the beginning of the progression, you can get through most other movements in the gym. There is this big thing about tibs though, which is like half funny. And I mean, I've done them. I thought they were good for ankle rehab as well, in terms of strengthening the muscles that support the ankle as well. And I've noticed the difference in hard stops when playing sport or playing basketball. I mean, when you stop hard, it's your tib ant which is absorbing that, right? When your heel's hitting the ground, is that not your tib ant which is primarily?
Well, tib ant, but quads would probably be the more predominant muscle that's active with that. Tib ant's going to be active, but like for a runner, like going downhill, like the forces are quite large in through like the quads and the knee.
But once your quads are up to scratch, which most people who strength train, they would be, wouldn't the tibs more likely be the limiting factor? Like, it's also big in the vertical jump space. Every guy that is, I don't know if you've seen the vertical jumpers online. Their whole life is just about jumping higher. Like Isaiah Rivera and whatnot. And all of their programs there's this obsession with like training the tibs. because when you take your penultimate step and when you take that last step, you need to absorb those forces and transfer them upwards.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So it's either not that important or it is, in which case you wouldn't need to train it, right?
Yeah.
Because who trains Tibbs if not these guys, the ATG and vertical jump dudes?
Yeah. Like, I don't know enough with that sort of vertical jump and sort of studied that to make a definite comment. But I think for like general population and, recreational athletes without having vertical jump aspirations, unless you're having issues and like injured ankle like that is a space that I would give out some like Tib Ant specific work.
Yeah, but when a guy's having a problem in his marriage, you don't recommend him to, do some Tib raises.
That's right.
I'm pretty sure Ben Patrick has a shirt that says "Girls dig big Tibs."
Yeah, I think I've heard that one too. The other time I've used it is there's like a condition you can get called like foot drop.
Yeah.
Too sure if you've heard of that.
Foot drop?
Yeah. So basically it's like an injury to the peroneal nerve that runs down the like outside of your leg. Or it can be related to like a lower back injury where there's like a compression of that nerve that leads to like that weakness of your
Does that peroneal nerve run through the foot as well?
It eventually does branch out and can innovate through there.
What's the nerve that you try and avoid when you're strapping someone's ankle? When you strapped my ankle when I injured it, you said if you strap it the wrong way, you can actually go over a nerve which sort of gets pinched.
Yeah, I think that's a branch of the peroneal nerve called the lateral plantar nerve. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't quote me on that though.
Yeah, that's right. You've given your disclaimers. Everyone knows. It's good.
Yeah.
So you were saying foot drop is you've got the nerve.
Yeah.
And
so that's something that I would give to someone to like they lose that strength. So their foot's essentially dropping. They don't have that strength into dorsiflexion. So they someone would often like trip over things. So I had an interesting case a few years ago. There was a youngish girl, maybe like 14, 15, fell over playing like basketball or something at school, landed on the outside of her leg, and her parents noticed she was walking funny, but they thought she just sprained her ankle. And then the doctors sent her off for an ultrasound and ankle was fine. They couldn't work it out. So they brought her in and then they described injury. And then just like with how she was walking and just going through her movements, we noticed she couldn't actively dorsiflex.
So when she's walking, instead of like taking the step and then lifting, it sort of just drags.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes there's like some slight activation. So it's not like consistently every step that they're dragging.
Yeah.
But yeah, what ended up happening was she landed on the outside of her knee quite close to that nerve. And that like bruising and inflammation led to that dysfunction of the nerve. So we did a lot of work in getting that neuromuscular system back up to scratch. So yeah, I was at one point giving her some Tib raises. So
yeah,
it has its place, but I think we're within that.
It could just be overstated in that sphere as to how amazing and life-changing it is.
Yeah.
I guess it's just sales, right?
Yeah. And
it's just sales.
Yeah. And in the, I guess 6.5 years I've been working, but then the 4 years at uni as well, where I've been in that sort of physio land, there's always like a muscle that's the hot topic. It was psoas at one point.
Yeah.
Everyone had tight psoases.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It was traps as well. Everyone's upper traps are overactive.
Overactive? What was the thing there?
So
what was the claim that was?
I can't even remember it exactly, but yeah, everyone's like traps are really tight and always constantly being used from like being, at a desk or whatever, and you need to release them. It's like that upper cross syndrome. So they're like really tight in through their pecs, tight through their traps.
Yeah.
Weak in their rhomboids. So you need to like stretch like the chest and the neck and then open up the back. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's always like
the problem is online. It's just they're really good at selling stuff.
Yeah.
Like they're really good at, you'll get some ad, and it's some guy that's like, almost in a wheelchair, and it's not until he started using something that, releases tension in his psoas muscle that now he's an elite sprinter. Like it's,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pretty, like it's actually good marketing. It just becomes a big thing, and then a few podcasts come out.
Mm-hmm. That's
You know?
it. Has its moment of fame for a few years, and then it'll be a new muscle that'll come out.
So now we're in the Tib era.
Mm.
What do you think's next?
That's what I was thinking. Maybe like foot intrinsics.
Hmm.
Everyone's there's some people out there starting to spread the word with these
The barefoot. I was going to say, I think it's going to be in the foot.
Yeah.
Like the whole barefoot.
Starts from the ground up. Like there's some good
there's good marketing
sales
already.
terms
Yeah.
there, yeah.
Yeah, the big toe activation and
Mm-hmm.
our shoes. Like I've got some barefoot shoes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the weird ones where you see the toes. I'll never walk around in those, but just shoes with the front is a bit wider.
Yeah.
And I have found a lot more comfort in them, just generally because it feels like I'm walking barefoot.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say it's solved all of my problems though, you know. Even like say with I'm flat-footed, and for a long time I was obsessed with trying to get rid of my flat-footedness. Like when I'm running, it was like, oh, my feet are coming in, and it's only recently that I've sort of started to learn like it's not a big deal. Like,
yeah, I think we may have previously had a bit of a chat about this.
Yeah.
But
I think you've sent me, and another mate I have who's a physio have sent me a video of like runners, like elite marathon runners in some African country, and all of their feet are just rolling in every step that they take.
Yeah.
And it's like it's quite normal. Your body's pretty good at adapting. And most problems generally, if you're getting different foot pains and lower body pains, and like the best thing you can do to start off with is lose excess fat and weight. That is probably overloading what your body could otherwise do with a normal body weight, you know?
It's going to be a contributing factor of that.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, like I am aware of some research with lower back pain where people that lost weight that had like chronic lower back pain didn't actually find too much of a difference in terms of their pain, which sort of goes into that biopsychosocial framework. It's not as simple as one thing. Like certain situations, that's might be the case, but like I said, it's a complex interweb. Yeah,
it's called pronation, right? Is it pronation when the foot rolls in?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like coined like overpronation, but then the thing is like it's just like a movement, like elbow flexion. Like how can you overly flex your elbow? It's just something your body does. You flex and you extend, you pronate and you supinate. It's just a natural movement. It doesn't have to be like pathologized. But yeah, then there's, I guess, like flat feet. You can just have like a resting flat foot as well, where you sit your foot and what we call the medial longitudinal arch sits more in that pronated position. But I think the study is like 85% of people have a flat foot. So
really,
85. Yeah.
Wow.
So something that's very normal and
I'm pretty sure flat-footed people were banned from the Roman army.
I think I remember hearing something about that.
I mean, it's discrimination, if you ask me, but I guess morally they weren't as developed. Yeah, I actually think you're right. I think the next thing will be the foot. Like I get ads about feet all the time, probably because I've done like read up on stuff or researched, thinking there's something terribly wrong with me. Maybe there is, I don't know. But it's like all this stuff, like the toe, you wear this thing on your toes that like spread your toes apart and you're supposed to just walk around in it.
Yeah.
Obviously barefoot shoes. And now there's all these like, I don't know if you've seen like the Foot Collective ads. They sell like this thing. It's like these bamboo.
Yeah. Like,
sorry, not bamboo, the cork.
Yeah. You like balance on it and stuff. Yeah.
And they've done like collaborations with Ben Patrick. Where he's like, if you can stand, you can improve your foot.
And like some of that stuff can be useful, like particularly in that rehab setting. But yeah,
I guess the issue is they overstate just how important it is. So it's not that they're not important. It's just it's being overstated.
Right.
I was pretty taken by ATG initially. I'm like, man, this guy's mad. And I still think that there's a huge market for what he does. And clearly there's results. You just sit there and read the YouTube comments. Thousands of people like, I tried this for a month and it helps. But when you throw around words like bulletproof, I think you need to be very careful.
That's right.
As to what that actually means to to bulletproof something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then again, I think that's sort of more of that evidence with that biopsychosocial aspect of injuries and, performances. It's often just not, one thing.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to make those big sort of sweeping statements.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I want to get your thoughts because I'm one to sort of, I have a bit of a random idea every second week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm told that, oh, Francis, what are you doing now? My family's given up on me. My mates are just not surprised anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I might just wake up one day and decide I'm just going to eat meat for 2 weeks and see what happens. And maybe I think I am influenced, whether I want to believe it or not, by just things that I see online. I don't think I believe them. I think I just get curious about how true it is.
Mm.
And the only question I ask myself is this going to kill me? If not, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on, like, say, the carnivore diet? Because honestly, what I was thinking is I'm really curious about how sustainable the carnivore diet is while someone is trying to build muscle. And I was tempted to almost like pre and post DEXA after doing carnivore and training. To sort of, I'm just curious because there's no data. Like the carnivore people say, yeah, you can build muscle, it's fine. Your body will adapt to using fat as energy, and the ones that are against carnivore, like, this is stupid. You have no chance.
Yeah. Guess like what's the reason though? Like why?
It's a good question. Why would you do that? Yeah.
Yeah, because like you can put on muscle and maintain, a healthy, figure from, just having a well-balanced diet.
I guess the benefit is for people who struggle with the concept of moderation. They're very binary. That's the main benefit I've seen. I think just generally the concept of moderation is a difficult one for me. And so it's like I'll just eat how I eat and then I'll fast for 3 days. And both of them I'm okay doing, but sustaining something more moderately I think is the challenge, which is why I want to do it. That's why I want to attempt, not why I want to do carnivore, why I want to attempt what we're discussing about, actually counting your calories and playing around with deficits over a couple of weeks and seeing what works and what doesn't, because that's the harder thing for me to do than to cut out everything completely.
Yeah.
But then also, say with carnivore, there are other suggested health benefits that are being pushed sort of by the carnivore-loving community, mainly for people with disorders, autoimmune diseases and stuff like that. But, I mean, I did carnivore for 2 weeks about 3 months ago, or just over 3 months ago. And honestly, 2 weeks in, I don't think I'd ever felt better in my life.
And what do you define as like feeling better? Like more energy?
More extremely consistent energy throughout the day. No more crashes at all, like zero. My sleep was really, really good. I slept really well. I woke up really energetic. None of that sort of grogginess you sometimes might experience in the morning or throughout the day. And I'm guessing that's just because a lot of the energy-related stuff is probably just related to consistent blood sugar. That was my assumption. That feeling of like you almost, it's very weird. You don't really feel full. So after a meal, you don't feel like tired or lethargic, and you only eat when you're actually hungry, which we don't really do generally. So I'll give you an example, right? If you're on carnivore, you're just eating meat and eggs. And so you might cook up a huge steak and you're starving. And so you demolish this steak. And then you just get to a point where you're like, I think if I have one more bite, I'm going to get sick. I'm just done. Now, in that moment, you literally can't eat anymore. But if I think about having, a piece of bread, I'm like, oh, I could eat that. So it's like, are you full or are you not full? And after doing carnivore for a bit, what tends to happen is you'll eat your meat and you feel full. And you're like, no, I'm sick of this. I don't want to eat any of this. And then 4 hours later or 5 hours, like, you know what? I feel like meat again. That's what happens. And what I found is like, is this like what it's like to only eat when you actually need food? You know what I mean? It sounds stupid what I'm saying maybe, but it was a very interesting experience in that way. So yeah, the main differences was sleep was way better. Way more consistent energy. You do have like sort of a consistent fat loss, and it's a pretty sustainable fat loss. So in that you're not just dropping heaps of kilos in a couple of days. I think over 2 weeks, I probably lost the first 2 weeks probably around 3 kilos of fat, which is given my weight, it's not too crazy.
How do you know it was fat?
Well, good question. Actually, I don't. I don't know if there was muscle in that, but I'm sort of deducting the water because after one day, I was down like 2.5 kilos, and that's definitely water weight. You're not losing 2.5 kilos of muscle while you're eating only protein.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm making assumptions about the fat. It could have been some muscle in there because even if I'm eating all protein, the hardest thing with carnivore is actually meeting your calories. It's very hard to consume 3,000 calories of meat. It's actually extremely hard.
I could imagine, yeah.
Yeah. So look, you're right. I don't know if it was all fat, but you do feel so good, man.
Are you eating like salad or like some sort of
eggs, meat?
Yeah.
And if you want to be a bit edgy,
dairy?
No.
No.
Some people have butter, and some people have like maybe olive oil. But I think I had some days just out of convenience. But yeah, it was just eggs and meat, and then just more eggs, more meat. Even mental clarity, like you feel really clear in the head. You're really like ultra focused. So there were benefits, and like I did experience them. But again, it's not. It's very hard to sustain. You know.
Did you find any other like negatives to it?
Negatives? Look, it took me about 4 to 6 days to overcome, like to get past the withdrawals from carbohydrates. That was probably the main thing. The other thing is you sort of like have to go through like this period of like constipation, and most people do that do carnivore. And you just find yourself like chucking your shit way less often, and you start to get like sort of concerned. But unless you're starting to get a lot of constipation, it's apparently not a problem. That said, I only did it for 2 weeks, so I never really. But some people, like I remember listening to Joe Rogan talk about when he did it for a month, and he's like 3 weeks in, he just had like raging diarrhea for like 4 days, just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So there are some like it takes your body time to adjust to what you're not consuming any more fiber. You just go to zero instantly. So
yeah,
but I never experienced discomfort. You know, like it's just like you sort of get like a mild constipation, and you're like, man, I don't think I've chucked the shit in a couple of days. Is that a problem? And like I feel fine. So.
Yeah, I guess like it'd be just like those long-term health ramifications like that would be my query over it.
Well, the biggest question about it is the cholesterol at the moment. And now the carnivore advocates are sort of making this claim, and I'm not sure how true it is, and I'm sure it just takes a lot of research, but they're making this claim that having high cholesterol isn't a problem when you're not consuming carbohydrates. And that the high cholesterol in and of itself is not the issue. It's only when you have that in combination with other things present. That's just me summarizing. I'm not an expert on anything. So, but that's what I've understood. You know, it's like there's a famous doctor in the US. What's his name? He was on Joe Rogan, this huge jacked guy. He's a doctor. He's written a book on the carnivore diet, massive advocate for it. So I listened to him on that, and he said some stuff about, cholesterol, we're starting to learn isn't that bad, having high cholesterol. So that's a bit of a risk factor. I think if you're going to do it, like forever, like a Jordan Peterson and his whole family are on the carnivore diet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And that's because they have like autoimmune problems. His daughter had 2 ankle replacements, 1 or 2 ankle replacements before she was 18.
Oh, that'd be interesting. Like,
yeah, that's how brittle she was. And as you would probably know, ankle replacements are extremely rare, especially at that age. Like you'd have to be pretty like messed up to need an ankle replacement.
Yeah, like it'd be interesting. Like, is it like a fusion that she had?
I don't
like,
know the details, to be honest.
That side of things.
I don't know.
Sometimes things are lost in translation.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah,
medically,
I'm quoting him, but medically, I'm not too sure. But she had major autoimmune issues.
Yeah.
If she would eat certain things, she'd be sick for weeks. Now, not only is she on carnivore, she only eats beef.
All right.
And like a specific cut. And
so no white meat, no eggs. Yeah.
No. And no lamb. Or she either eats beef or lamb. I'm pretty sure it's beef.
Yeah.
And Jordan Peterson has been on it for the last 7 or 8 years. and he had gum disease, which they told him would never heal. And it's after 3 years it healed. He lost a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
And the weight loss, I don't really place too much emphasis on that because it's probably just due to like your calories going down. It's not because you are eating meat. That's my belief anyway.
Yeah.
That he had lots of issues that disappeared almost completely after a few years. So I think if you're going to live that way so strictly, it has to be because there's some great benefit to your health. Other than, my mind is clear. You can just cut down on your carbs or sugar and you'll probably achieve that same thing,
Yeah.
you know?
I guess like there's like confounding factors as well that, you know, to be honest, I try to eat like a healthy, well-balanced diet. I don't drink coffee. I feel fairly good with my energy levels. Like there's periods, and I find it's maybe more related to how I've slept the previous night with feeling a bit flat at times, but most of the time I'm pretty good. So like,
which is the argument, right? That the benefits you might be experiencing can still be had through another avenue of what you eat. But it's easier to do because through carnivore, because just by virtue of, you know, doing carnivore, you're no longer having ice cream before bed. You know, you're no longer drinking coffee with, you know, vanilla and caramel in it and whatever else people put. So it sort of does all the work for you. So there is that argument. That's why I think if you're going to do it for a long period of time, you need a pretty decent benefit to your health.
And that, like, the other thing is most people you would assume don't eliminate whole food groups from their diet. And, you know, there's a lot of people living healthy lives. And
that's true, yeah.
You know, if you, I think, just stick to the basics of, you know, sleep well, try to eat well, get a, you know, balance of everything, you know, exercise regularly, manage your stress, you know, all those big ticket items are being ticked off, and, you know, going to live a more than likely a healthy and prosperous life. And it's just, I guess, if other things come your way, like, you know, injuries or, you know, autoimmune disease or other things that might, you know, throw that off. But for most of the population, if you're doing that, you're going to be pretty well right, I would say.
Look, it actually raises a good point, because I think this whole space online, it takes away, so, you know, take the whole tib thing, right? And they just harp on about tibs. It's almost like, look, until you're going to the gym couple, you know, 3 times a week, training your whole body, see how you are after a month, and then think about if you're going to train your tibs that intensely.
That's right, yeah.
You know, and like, we become so obsessed with the 1%ers, we leave out the 80%, you know? So have you heard of Dr. Mike Israetel?
Yeah.
Mind you, I think that guy's like, his training philosophy, I think, is a game changer.
Mike Israetel's?
Yeah. I think he's really good.
Yeah, I love him. He's good.
Really foundational. And honestly, he's been the primary sort of educator for me in terms of training and technique, form, you know, slowing down those eccentrics, pausing, loading the stretch position, all of those principles.
Yep.
I think work. And look, we have the data now.
Yeah.
We have the data.
That's right.
Yeah.
Proof's in the pudding.
Proof's in the pudding, mate. But he once, you know, he did this video and he's like, oh, someone will come up to me and say, oh, Dr. Mike, you know, can you review my training program? And he says, do you sleep 8 hours a night? And they're like, no. He's like, all right, then F off. Come back when you sleep 8 hours a night. Like, I'm not going to waste my time optimizing what tricep exercise you've done that targets your long head when you're sleeping 6 hours a night and eating like shit. Like, it's just that change to the workout, that 1% is negligible compared to the change you'd experience if you slept better, managed your stress, as you said, and ate healthier. So it's a good point. We become so obsessed with the 1%ers, we just leave out the most important stuff.
Yeah. And that's the thing as well with, like, training, sort of fussing over trying to optimize it.
Yeah.
Where you can sort of get away with just good enough.
Yeah.
Particularly, you know, life is going to throw curveballs in at you. So if you can just try to develop some healthy habits and just have that consistency and routine with it, that's what's going to drive majority of your progress, not, you know, fussing over trying to optimize it.
It's like that saying, which I think is the perfectly encapsulates this. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
Yeah,
that's always been my problem, is that it's like, oh, we need to be even with this podcast, like I released an episode a year ago and I didn't release an episode for a year. Not because I was fussing over stuff. I was busy with other things, but I was always so hyper-focused on perfecting everything before we go ahead. And it's like, mate, just start. Just show up. Remember I saw you at the gym the other day and you said to me, what are you training today? And I said, honestly, I've actually done my split and need time to recover, but I've sort of made myself show up almost every day. And even if I don't have something specific to do, like I'll just be like, you know what, today I'm doing shoulder mobility and a few accessory exercises, just showing up.
Yeah.
But previously it would have been like, oh, if I don't have a full hour and 15 minutes, I'm not going to the gym.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know what, I've got 40 minutes today. We'll just leave this and this exercise out and get these done. And we'll be back next week. So it's a good point. Like we become so obsessed with the perfect, we leave out the good. And if you do the good long enough, you're going to get pretty awesome results.
Yeah.
But if you wait for the perfect, you're just never going to do anything.
Yeah.
And it pretty much applies to anything, really. Applies to business. Like the business I started with a mate of mine, it's like we just put up this website and like, all right, we've got the website up. And then we're like, man, this website's shit. So we made a new website. And a few months later, we're like, man, it's actually pretty shit. Let's improve it again. But imagine we waited until we had the third one. You would have gone all that time. You just obsess.
Yeah.
And really the ones that win are the ones that get in first and just every day iterate.
That's it.
1% a day is 360 times better than, was it 300 or 100 times better? Mate, it's if you improve 1% a day, how much do you improve over a year? Mate, we did advanced maths in high school.
Is there like some sort of like compounding effect then?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you go 1.01 to the power of 365. Yeah, 37.8, 38 times better. So if you improve 1% a day, at the end of the year, you'll be 38 times better.
Which is what? 3,800% improvement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad, Isn't bad. So look, my goal is to improve my bench 1% a day. And
look, I don't know how
then we can beat Eddie Hall, in a couple of months. No. But it is true, like the whole just good enough is good enough,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that quote on a frame with your face on it. Okay. Good enough is good enough. Nathan Duguid.
Duguid, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something like I try to like promote to my patients as well with like doing their rehab. Like miss a day here or there, it's not the end of the world. Don't
just keep going.
But yeah, the more consistent you are though, the more likely like the quicker your results are going to be. So just stick at it.
It's like when someone has an unhealthy meal, and it's Tuesday and like, I guess we're going to have to restart on Monday.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. That never typically works too well. Yeah. Do good. Honestly, it's been an honor.
Hey, pleasure's been all mine.
Look, here's what we're going to do. 90 days, we're going to come back here. And this format here will hold me accountable. And we're going to play around a little bit with these calories. We'll
Did
see
we
what
end
happens.
up setting some goals for the next?
I think that's what we should do. Let's set some goals. So I don't need to write them down. This is being recorded, so I'll jot them down after. I would like to continue with the rate of muscle gain. I don't know if that's sustainable. I'm not sure how long it can be sustained. There's plenty to do on the left side here, so maybe most of it will be there.
Make up some ground there.
Yeah. But let's just say in 3 months, we'll set a goal of, what do you reckon, 2.5 kilos? More?
I think that's
pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah. Could I ask, like, how, like those sort of external goals are good?
Yeah.
But then, like, my question is, like, over the last 3 months, like, have you been consistent in the gym? Like, what, 5 days, 6 days? What's the sort of, like, breakdown of that?
Yeah, good question. Look, the last 3 months, I've never gone to the gym less than 3 times a week. And I've averaged 5 ish, 5 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt some weeks I just felt like I was recovering a bit quicker. Could have been because of sleep, food, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off with the 5-3-1 program. You know, the 5-3-1.
I'm like familiar with
boring
it, like,
but big. So it's like you do 5-3-1 reps on bench, and then you do 5 sets of 10, and then you do 5 sets of 10 of like a back exercise, and that's it.
Right.
It's very boring.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're doing 1 day bench, 1 day military press, 1 day squat, 1 day deadlift. I started with that and it was really good, but then I found myself needing more frequency in the week. So then I switched to a push-pull split, push-pull legs, or pull-push leg. I do it. So it's not like I'll do pull, push, leg, and I'll see how I feel. Do I go pull straight away again? No, I need another day. I'll wait another day, and then I might do pull, push, wait another day, leg.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll slot in the rest as I need it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying it's usually I'm pretty much averaging probably 4 to 6 times a week at the moment. Yeah. The only week I missed, I was quite sick maybe 3 weeks ago out of like a pretty strong virus, and I didn't train for 5 days. You know when I saw you at the gym on that Saturday? The next day, Sunday night, I felt it coming on. By Monday, I was cooked. And I didn't train again until the following Saturday.
Yeah. I really like those like behavior-based goals, things that you have absolute control over. That's going to help you achieve the
Okay, yeah. So instead of saying this much muscle gain, it's like
that's good to have for sure, and like you know, something to work towards, but something that you have
more control over is I'm going to go to the gym 4 times a week and make sure I
well, like even like you're happy with the rate of progress you've made.
Yeah.
Like if it's just the same, like I don't want to miss, have at least 3 sessions a week, and averaging 4 or 5 or whatever it was. So if you can just like stick to that, I think that's that goal that's going to drive those habits and routines and behaviors that we've spoken about to achieve that 2.5 kilo muscle gain.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a fair goal.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to show you something here. Does it show? So I found that tracking the workouts also helps. Like actually tracking what you're doing. I found it's not a good idea to obsess too much over the numbers, because you can have variations week to week in your lifts for a range of reasons, even up to the point of mechanical differences week to week. Like, for example, say like lateral raises. If you just bend your elbows even slightly more the next week, you'll lift more weight.
Yeah.
And then you straighten back out and you're like, oh, I just got weaker. So it can be a little bit confusing like that if one's not careful. But this app that I track on, it shows you on like a calendar.
Is this the one that you showed me the other day in the gym?
Yeah. That shows you like also like session volume and stuff like that, which is, here we go,
Did you
calendar.
end up tweaking your volume at all based on our discussion?
It's just remained the same.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So I've stuck to that the Greg, what's his name?
Knuckles
program. The second day of that program, well, here's the thing, because I got sick right after we spoke, when I got back, I sort of started gradual again. I just couldn't lift the same.
Yeah.
Like my body was just really fatigued. And so I sort of had to gradually go back up to that.
Yeah.
And I've kept it. But since I've started using this app, this shows you the days that I've trained.
Okay.
So you can see the big gap is when I got sick a few weeks ago. Some weeks I've hit 6 days. Some are like 3 or 4.
Solid.
So I suppose a better goal to have would be then focus on the behavioral goals that we believe will lead to these results, and we've seen can lead to these results. So
because like what I was sort of like thinking of, like, okay, like if you wanted to be like more specific about improving your arm size and the left one particularly, and doing some unilateral work for your triceps or whatever, like considering like how many sets per week you're doing for that, and you can get quite specific about that. But then that goes into that quote about like chasing perfection when, we should probably be just more focusing on that.
Well, let's chase good enough.
That's it.
Let's chase good enough. All right. So let's go with the behavioral, right? We'll say, I think the training frequency is a good goal to keep.
Mhm.
I think I've been doing it and just keep that. So at least 3 times a week. We want to get the whole split done at least once a week.
Yeah.
Right. For the left arm, what are we going to do about this left arm?
So, well, what are you currently doing with your
Like bicep training
or
or bicep and tricep?
Yeah.
Look, on my
arguably like the
triceps, the bigger muscle.
2/3.
Yeah, 2/3.
Yeah. So
Look, here's what I do at the moment. On my push day, aside from obviously benching, which could also be incline dumbbell, can also be close grip barbell, specifically for triceps, I'm doing cable extensions, 2 hand, and then I'm doing cable overhead extensions.
Mhm.
Those are the 2 that I do. And I'm doing 3 to 4 sets of each. And that's usually once or twice a week, depending if I get the second push session in.
Mhm.
And then on my pull day, I will do incline bench dumbbell curls.
Okay,
You know how you're
yep.
sitting back
Yep.
a little bit, you get that load in the stretch position, as Dr. Mike says. And I also, the second exercise is generally curls on the cable machine, but like 2 hand, bilateral, and very rarely like hammer curls. I would probably say it's usually a bilateral movement.
Mhm.
Again, probably 3 sets each,
Mhm.
once
That sounds
1 to 2 a week.
sounds pretty solid there in your volume.
Mm.
Like I said, I think a mixture of like bilateral and unilateral would be good to try to, even out the discrepancies. And you could also consider maybe doing 1 or 2 extra sets at the end just on that left. And considering, like I said, sort of most of your bicep stuff seems to be like unilateral or closer to a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
Maybe like focusing more on that tricep component.
Okay.
So as an example, say you push days Tuesday and Friday. On the Tuesday session, just do what you have been with the bilateral stuff.
Yeah.
And then add in an extra set of just like some single arm rope extensions.
Mm.
And then on the Friday session, you might do just more unilateral specific. So same sort of exercises. Like I like the idea of like something in more of a neutral position and then something where you're getting a bit more of a stretch through the long head.
Yeah.
But just one arm at a time.
Yeah.
Cables are good, or whether you want to use a dumbbell, whatever, mix it up. Our bodies don't know specifically what exercise, so you don't have to. But if you prefer keeping it to the same thing and easier to track that way, there's pros and cons in how you can approach it. But that's what I'd maybe do. So sort of having one session, we're still doing predominantly bilateral with like a 1 or 2 sets of some unilateral just on the left. And then that other session, just unilateral for both. And then again, you might add a little bit of volume at the end. Say you do like a neutral position tricep on the Tuesday, on the Friday, you might do like an extra set or 2 of some overhead stuff.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
I think we can do that.
Pretty reasonable.
I think it's reasonable. We can get that left arm up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll take a while to catch it up. But I think it's doable. We just need to see a bit more than 50 grams. Like that's
interesting though, like to what's the word I'm looking for? Validate the DEXA if you were to do like a circumferential measurement of your arm. You considered that?
You know what? I did the forearms, and then I got like a call for work and I didn't finish. So I can confirm that for you probably later tonight.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
It would be interesting.
Because the scan I did did have like measurements. So that was cool.
Yeah, I really want to, I think either way, I know that my left is weaker anyway. So regardless of the accuracy of how much muscle mass, there's clearly work to be done. Yeah, in bringing it up to speed.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what about in terms of like now? I guess the fat loss goals. What's realistic? Because if you ask me, I'm just going to say I want to lose all of it. But I think if we're going to do this whole gradual caloric deficit, I need to get out of my mind that I can just knock off 4 kilos in a week, and that's going to be, So I was sort of thinking like a good goal might be between 7 and 10 kilos in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, like a good rate of change is that sort of half a kilo to a kilo a week.
Okay. So that works then.
Yeah.
7 to 10,
yeah. Falls in that. But then, if we're just going off like body fat.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's realistic. And then like if we're potentially putting on 2.5 of muscle in an ideal situation, our net there's what, 4-ish at a minimum as a net change in your body weight. I think that's
pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Would trend help in this process?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Considered it?
I don't know.
I wouldn't.
No?
Like I said, but
Don't just jab shit in your ass randomly, yeah.
Long term and thinking about our health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus it's for horses, isn't it?
I'm not too sure. I honestly haven't done heaps of research into that stuff. So
not thinking about it anytime soon?
Nah.
No, that's all right. Yeah, all right then. I think, look, let's just go with 8 kilos.
You know? And I guess like then that behavioral thing that you have control over is probably that calorie intake. It is going to dictate that. So trying to think of like what a good goal could be in terms of maybe like having that like target calorie and being within say 200 plus or minus.
Yeah.
But like on a daily basis, and then over a week, you definitely want to be like average hitting that. If you're over that mark, then obviously you're not going to be in that deficit. So
so what do you reckon? Like 3,200 based on the numbers?
Like I'd be nervous for you to do that and then like have a big drop off initially. Maybe if you try like an aim just for that first week a bit closer to maintenance and to see what happens there. And then adjust accordingly.
Okay.
Or if you're happy to, I guess, take on that and be a bit more potentially aggressive in that first week and say your true maintenance is 3,600 and your deficit's 32, that 400 deficit is like decent, sort of what's generally recommended. But if you wanted to go for a bit more of a gradual approach, you might go somewhere around like the 200-300 deficit mark. But
what would be the difference between, you know, let's just say my maintenance is 35. If I was to consume 3,200 strictly a day, at the end of the week, I'd lose X kilos, you know, or a kilo. Let's just say a kilo. How much is 1 kilo in calories? Do you know? Isn't there like an equivalent?
Yeah, it's quite complicated. There's a dietitian I follow, and like the old like general rule of thumb would be like a 500 calorie deficit is either 500 grams or 1 kilo
a week.
Yeah, loss.
Yeah. Okay.
But that was like a rule of thumb, and like
it's very general.
Could be a
very broad.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So regardless of the number, you know, you can go into a caloric deficit and you'll lose X amount of kilos. Or you could just eat your maintenance and then walk enough every day to achieve that deficit. What's the difference between dieting off your calories and burning off your calories?
So obviously you asked me about this or floated the idea, and I've been searching all week for where I've heard this before. I'm sure it was either Omar Isif, this like guy off YouTube. Do you remember him at all? Have you come across Omar Isif? This guy with like ponytail. He was big back in the day, like 10 years ago. It was either him or another guy on YouTube, Jeff Nippard. And,
he's big.
Yeah. I can't even remember the term, but what I thought it was is calorie partitioning, I think it's called. So the difference between, like you said, burning off the remainder or just eating that much. And from what I recollect, it is more beneficial to have that higher calorie intake and burn it off.
Yeah, that's what I'd heard as well.
Yeah. And I think...
But do we know why?
It's got something to do with like your metabolism. I think from a longevity perspective, it's obviously going to be more beneficial doing some like, you know, aerobic exercise to, you know, make that up. And I think like metabolism as well comes into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I try to
there isn't much on it, eh?
Yeah.
There isn't much.
Yeah.
I'd wondered for a while, and I again, it was that Derek guy from More Plates, More Dates, and he just mentioned in passing in a podcast, like, dieting versus burning, it's in my experience, generally it's better to burn it off. You achieve a bit of a better body composition.
Yeah.
And that's all he
and
said.
I think that's also rings a bell. Like you're able to maintain more muscle and like lose more like fat relative.
Yeah. And I feel like it makes sense, but I can't, really articulate why.
Yeah. Neither can I, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think what I want to add to this as well is I think 3 times a week, I want to add some low to moderate cardio just as a habit. I've read a lot that walking is actually a really good form of fat loss purely because it doesn't have the same impact on your appetite. It's a very low energy activity. And it's quite accessible in the sense you can do it while you're doing other things as well. But I suppose any zone 2 training would achieve that.
Yeah. And like the World Health Organization recommends 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise.
Yeah.
And I think in general, like something that I've taken on board more over the last 18 months or so is prioritizing, getting in some cardio. So yeah, whatever means I think you enjoy. And it's just like for that like sustainable approach. Obviously there's a lot of research with like, the cardiovascular effects of aerobic exercise and, prevention of diabetes and, hypertension and strokes, things like that. So I think if we can get into good habits now in our, 20s and 30s and, whilst you don't have, things like kids and families and, time-based pressures there and, form some good habits with it and, start to enjoy it, like use that analogy earlier on of like the runner and not, thinking you're a runner and you're never going to be a runner. But then once you start running and you get that runner's high and break that threshold, I think, there's something to, trying to do that now and set yourself up in the long term. Because
well, then maybe
because if you don't start now, like, you just put it off. So I think that would be a really good goal and just for your health generally to.
Maybe then I'll start with trying to hit my maintenance calories and then adding in what I can to bring that down a little bit through and just see what happens. And if it's not enough, then we'll make an adjustment.
Either the calories or the exercise, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, say like if you want to set a goal for that, like 3 times a week of cardio, and what would you say, like at least 30 minutes worth?
I would say at least 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and it's a good start. And that's the thing. If you can just start, create that habit, and then you can always build on it from there.
Look, I used to like run a lot more. Like I started running a while ago, and again, I crossed that threshold, really started to enjoy it. So the jogging isn't really like much of a problem. I think I can get back into that quite easily. But I think I really want to add a couple of walks in there. Just something very, very low energy. Maybe just end the day, go for a walk, chuck on a podcast, whatever.
Yeah.
And just sort of make that more of a habit,
Yeah. That sounds good. Obviously, like the mental health benefits of that as well. And
but look, I'm not going to lie, man. When the World Health Organization recommends something, I'm pretty inclined not to do it. I'm not a big fan of the World Health Organization, so you gotta sell me. Look, you got to sell me what Duguid thinks. You can't sell me what the World Health Organization thinks because I'm too anti-establishment.
Have you heard of Peter Attia?
Yeah. Peter Attia is great.
Yeah. So
that guy's just like lives and breathes zone 2 cardio. Everything, every second thing he says about zone 2 cardio.
Yeah,
he's great, but he's really, really good.
Yeah, but like I listened to him on Diary of a CEO, and that it was whilst I was already running, but there's sort of like reinforced to me like
the importance of like, he says 4 hours a week of zone 2 or 3. It's either 3 or 4, and he just swears by it. Thinks it builds the greatest aerobic base.
Yeah, I mean, he's good, but same sort of thing. I did hear something where I remember. Yeah, he had Stu McGill on his podcast. I'm pretty sure. And
who's Stu McGill?
He's a guy in the rehab space who specializes in low back pain. And there's some of the things on there that he was saying that wasn't quite evidence based.
Peter Attia was saying stuff that's not
I think
evidence.
he was, as well as Stu McGill.
Right.
I think Stu McGill was the big propagator of it.
Yeah.
Because he's very like biomechanical focused.
Yeah.
And that's what I think what his like PhD was in biomechanics.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's like, yeah, I feel like sometimes those people get like quite popular and they definitely have some good stuff. Like you still need to be mindful and filter some of the stuff they say, particularly when they're starting to step outside their lane.
So wait, did he step outside his lane in that they were talking about cardio and zone 2
No,
related?
they're talking about like lifting and how that it's unsafe to, try to get PBs when you're in your 50s and 60s because you won't be able to play with your grandkids.
Peter Attia is big on that. Like he believes the risk isn't worth the reward for certain lifts, especially ones with like high axial loads and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Which like there is
a truth to it, but you're saying that it's not the full picture.
That's
again.
right. And there's plenty of people that do it and are okay. And like I feel like it just spreads a negative message and puts people off from exercising. That's, what I'm trying to, promote.
Yeah.
Just knocking down barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I think we have our goals then. So we've got the behavioral goals that lead to a more, measurement-based goal, both on the muscle front and the fat front. And we'll reconvene in 3 months. No matter what happens, we're reconvening.
Yeah.
And I've got to face the music, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, sounds good.
And like we didn't really touch too much on like strength, but maybe that can be for next time. I reckon. Like what we can sort of do to bring up the numbers a little bit. Bring up the numbers, where those numbers put me in sort of relative to my height and weight and whatever else they use to measure that. Because I've also really enjoyed that process, is like learning sort of how to improve your lifts. You've obviously got the big three lifts, which you got to be careful not to let them define who you are. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's been interesting learning about it. Maybe that's for next time.
Yeah, but I think like that's good as well. Like having that as a secondary thing, because it keeps you motivated to go to the gym, and as a byproduct, you can hit those body composition goals as well. So it sounds good.
Yeah, it'll be interesting one day. I'm keen to eventually. Hopefully one day, I'm keen to have a conversation with Clayton as well. Because, like watching Clayton from a distance over the years, like he's just jacked. And
chopped up beast,
mate. He's jacked. And it's quite inspiring, to be honest. Like to see that, and just his sort of training philosophy, because he's like big in like the CrossFit style training, right?
Sort of, learning new things and exploring. So he's doing well.
Yeah. There's many ways to skin a cat, as they say. So it'll be good. We'll get there. Dugs, it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. And we'll have you back soon. Hopefully there'll be no injuries from now till then. Yeah. Otherwise we'll be meeting a bit earlier. But
for you or me.
For you, yeah. Yeah, well, anyone listening, Duguid Physio, is that the Instagram page?
That's right, yeah.
Duguid Physio. We're going to chuck the link and the handle in the description, bio, wherever this is posted. But Dugs recently tore his pec, and he's been documenting the rehab process. So he's the guinea pig here. And I've heard, rumors that you deliberately tore your pec just for the content. So that's a big sacrifice. So the people appreciate that. But
doing it for the gram.
You're a legend, Dugs. Thanks so much.
Been a pleasure,
mate. The pleasure's mine, and we'll be back soon.
Keen for it.
Legend.